state of Broadband. Good morning. We are ready to go. To kick us off here this morning, joining us for the challenge, your challenge, as a convened group of broadband stakeholders is the Deputy Secretary of Commerce, otherwise known as my boss. He is at the Department of Commerce leading the business and community development division of the agency, which is the primary purpose of the agency is business and commerce, growing our economy, creating an environment that supports that. So we'd like to have him come up for a moment and give you your challenge, and please do give him a warm round of applause because he has made a lot of this happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dan. I will apologize in advance. I've got a bit of a cold, so you're going to find today that I bring these unique qualities called a face that was made for radio and a voice that was made for silent movies. So, but please, hopefully you can hear beyond that. One of the things that I think that I first want to lead off with is how impressed I am with the gathering and the attendance at this event. When Stan had talked to me earlier, some months earlier about doing this, we were really in a quandary as to what we might expect for attendance. And I think what we've had yesterday and the number of you here today far exceed what we had originally anticipated. So I think you're to be commended on your interest. And I think that one of the keys I hope to leave with you as I end my comments is that this should not be the culmination of this event. This should be a beginning. We've had incredible attendance, we've had incredible speakers, a lot of knowledge shared, a lot of interaction between all those that are here. But if it ends today, when we leave this room or we leave this building, then we really haven't accomplished what we need to do. We haven't done what our main objective was. Throughout history, technological advances have really been the key not only to individual prosperity, but also to collective and community prosperity. If you look at some of the major advances over time, things like the wheel, the advance of the industrial age, electrification.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll sound so much better now, I'm sure. If you look at, as I said, the wheel, the industrial age, electrification, and even the personal computer. Just think how those have changed our lives, not only from the standpoint of our individual success or individual aspirations, but from the standpoint of our economies, both local, state, national, and international. Those are the kinds of things that have really transformed humanity and society into something very different. And it's one of those things that each of those, when some of those major changes were coming about, there were folks who were very frightened. There were folks that were reluctant to take that step. And there are some negatives. There are some challenges that come with each of those steps to that next wave, to that next era of technology. But I think in looking back, when you look at where we are as a society, where we are in this country, if any one of those things had not happened, if there hadn't been acceptance, if there hadn't been over time this willingness to take that capability that had just been provided and take it to the next step and the next step and the next level, we would live in a far different world. And I think it's a world that even old timers like me, who sometimes are reluctant to grasp and to move into those new changes and into that new way of thinking, would never go back. So I think that's where we are now. We're at a point where we have some incredible opportunities. We also have incredible challenges. Kansas, as we've heard through, in a number of the sessions, and as you all know, is not a state that lends itself well, in some cases, to a proliferation of high-speed broadband. We have geographical challenges, we have demographic challenges in terms of the concentrations or lack of concentrations of population, which creates some unique situations that other locales sometimes don't have to deal with. But it also provides, I think, an opportunity for a lot of different possibilities in terms of ways to move forward and ways to develop solutions. One of the things that I have come to conclude is that broadband, this issue of broadband, in many ways is similar to my opinion of energy. There are a lot of different types of energy, a lot of different modes, and you can hear people argue infinitely about which is best. In my opinion, it really doesn't matter which is best, but because for us to really be successful as a country, as a society, we have to look at all of those and find those opportunities where each of these different options or different modes is applicable. There is no, I don't think it's a one-size-fits-all. You know, we can do this in one locale and it'll work in every other locale. Each situation is going to be a little different. The numbers are going to be different. The economic drivers are going to be different. And those things all have to be taken into consideration. And I know in a panel I sat in on yesterday, it was very clear that the panelists also had that view, that there are different answers for different situations, and maybe they'll actually take a combination of answers. So those are all things that I think are critical to us. When you look at broadband in terms of economic development, just think what it means to a business person who now has the capacity or the capability to market a product or service around the globe that heretofore was impossible. Think of the amounts of data, the amounts of information that they can have at their fingertips to make decisions. Think of the opportunities to remotely control operations in a way that has never been done before. Those are all the capabilities that come with this type of service, which used to be, I think, thought as maybe a luxury, but I think more and more it's become a necessity. If you're going to be connected, if you're really going to participate in a world economy, broadband internet access at high speeds is critical. So I think that's where we are, that's where we're poised. And again, we have challenges. One of the things I certainly want to leave you with is, as I said in my opening comments, this isn't about an experience for the sake of the experience. What we hope comes from today and from the events yesterday, the meetings yesterday, is a renewed interest and energy in trying to work together, whether it be looking at state strategies and how those can be taken, how do you interact with state leadership to help move the ideas forward? How do you do it at the local level? We have a number of communities that are represented in this meeting, and every one of those has a different and a specific situation that they're dealing with, but they all have also learned a lot in their efforts to move forward in this area. So I think the opportunity for interaction, I know in the next session, there'll be a lot of discussion about other states, what they're doing, and I think that provides us some information that can be valuable. And later on in other sessions, there'll be opportunities for you to talk about your experience locally, to talk about some of the strategies that you've taken into your repertoire and how you're trying to move forward. And that exchange is critical because, again, the idea of this session or of this conference, of this meeting, was to bring people who have not only locally but also experts from around the country to a singular place where we could bring those ideas together and then use this as a launching pad to move us to that next level, because we have opportunities that are almost beyond our grasp, but we have to take those steps and we have to be committed and continue to move in that direction if we're going to achieve the things that we have as possibilities. Again, thank you very much for being here. I'm just overwhelmed at the attendance and the interest. With that, I will walk away here and let Stan tell you all about the real things that are going to happen.
Thank you, sir. All right, well, with that, let us turn to what are some things going on in other states. As you all know, I mentioned yesterday, and you probably heard through some of the other sessions, each of the 50 states and the U.S. Territories, District of Columbia, have all had some version or another of some broadband planning taking place over the past 5 years. And there has been a lot of lessons learned, a lot of best practices developed. And what we wanted to do to get us started this morning is to hear some perspectives from some other states. And I encourage you to really kind of take the challenge and engage in some dialogue and questions. Our panelists are not being put up here to be the experts and have the answers to everything. but to share and their experiences and to engage you with what you're having as well. So to kick us off, we will please welcome Gina, who is one of our pilot project leaders. She's from the Topeka, she's the CEO of the Topeka Shawnee County Public Library and has been an excellent example of how to engage stakeholders across her community in the planning process. And I'm really pleased to have her, and I'll turn it over to her to moderate and bring up the panelists for us for the session. Gina, thank you.
Thank you, Stan, very much. I'll ask my colleagues to join me. We have an opportunity here in Kansas today to hear from people that are doing great and visionary work at the local level in Kansas City, in 2 states that are demonstrating best practices and real progress, Nebraska and New Mexico, and then Lynn Chadwick from the National Telecommunications and Information Administration. So Rick Usher from the city of Kansas City will be kicking off. And I want to reiterate what, can you hear me? I want to reiterate what Mr. Kelly said. And that is that this is an unprecedented opportunity for we in Kansas, at whatever level we're working, to begin to think about how we work together as a state to create a comprehensive plan for broadband that we can all work on individually at our local levels, but come together in a collaborative effort to make things happen. So as you listen to their experiences, what they've learned, what they think are best practices, think about how we might replicate that and learn from that in Kansas. And with that, I'll turn it over to Rick Usher.
Thank you. I'm Rick Usher, Assistant City Manager for... Hi, I'm Rick Usher, Assistant City Manager for Small Business and Entrepreneurship at the City of Kansas City, Missouri. And thanks for having me today. I'm actually just bringing a city perspective and really what's become a regional perspective in Kansas and Missouri, Kansas City, Kansas, Kansas City, Missouri, and really now 20 cities in the metropolitan area. This is a presentation I've used at a couple of different conferences, but from our perspective, Kansas City, Missouri is not a municipal broadband provider. We saw the opportunity to work with Google Fiber to respond to their RFI back in 2010 and to really help build that project out. And what we've seen is that the most important thing we've done is created this technical team. And not only for broadband deployment, but really cities for really major projects where a company sees the value of investing in your community, then it's really your responsibility to make sure that the process that they're going through to develop in your city is smooth and that there's open communication. And that's really what's facilitated by these projects. We've done this with lots of large projects on the Kansas side. I know they use a similar procedure in the development of the Legends area, the Speedway, Nebraska Furniture Mart. On the Missouri side, we've done that with our Power Line District, Sprint Center, the National Nuclear Security Campus, Southern Kansas City. This is a fiber hut constructed, just a few photos of the construction. Western Auto Lofts, MDUs getting connected with Google Fiber, and this is what the deployment looks like as it goes through your town. Customer service obviously is a huge component while you're building a project like this. With it being a linear project over 7,000 miles of fiber, it's literally passing every house in your city. So you run into, of course, construction issues, and we do our best to resolve those with the neighbors. This is some of the economic development that comes with it, job creation. This is, I think, over 100 vehicles they brought, employment they brought. So I wanted to go through a few things maybe on the leadership side where we feel regionally, and I will talk really kind of ignoring the state line in all of this, that this is really a way that Kansas City, as a region, is competing on a national and really international level. We responded, Google put out their RFI in 2010. Kansas City, Missouri responded by March of 2010. Kansas City, Kansas, and similarly processed that. And then May 17th, 2011 was when Google Fiber announced Kansas City, Missouri. They'd announced Kansas City, Kansas a few weeks earlier. Longer story about why that happened. March 1st, 2012, construction started. And just 9 months later, December 2012, Eric Schmidt at Google says, it's actually not an experiment, we're actually running it as a business. So where the city signed on, where this was an experiment, took that risk to try to help with a proof of concept. Within 9 months of construction, they've announced it as a viable business. And then in April of 2014, Patrick Bichette at Google Fiber says that I think everyone now in the industry is talking about the gig. So Kansas City helped change the national broadband conversation to gigabit. And there's a huge gigabit revolution going on in the country. And we've got the incumbent ISPs responding to that in a number of ways, most positively with AT&T talking about building out gigapower, Time Warner's talking about building gigabit networks in many communities, and then there's lots of local providers that are doing that as well. So this is really what a gigabit region, bi-state region, looks like. Highlighted in blue, more or less highlighted in blue, is the Kansas City, Missouri build out. I didn't exclude Raytown or Grandview, two cities that are completely encompassed within our city limits. But that's, when you look at the metro, just under probably half of the service area. And on the Missouri side, Google Fiber passes over 210,000 households. It's available to those residents today. The key really is also symmetric gigabit. Your upload speed is as fast as your download speed. That changes you from being a consumer of the internet to a content provider. We're looking for increases in distance learning opportunities, distance working, home-based business, and now with the business offering gigabit services to small business, really growth of small business. And I think a lot of folks don't recognize that a lot of storefront businesses are in the digital divide as deeply as residents in lower income neighborhoods. We're trying to work on some initiatives there. And then just the incredible things that just happen organically. Startup Village, if you're not familiar with that, check out Kansas City Startup Village, attracting entrepreneurs from across the country and a couple from outside the country. A little bit of humor, don't want to offend my ISP friends in the room, but this just happened. A couple of billboards next to each other on Independence Avenue. And then this groundswell of community action. Organizations, Google Fiber was a lightning rod for entrepreneurship, startup accelerators in Kansas City. It truly is an economic development project. It took a little while, I think, for folks in the region to see that, but it's creating jobs, it creating companies. And this is just a little poke at the folks who think that Kansas City, Missouri, Kansas City, Kansas gave too much away in our negotiations to get Google Fiber back in 2011. And so really, this is Mount Everest. Who remembers the 20th person to climb Mount Everest? We had a lot of sacrifice to make, a lot of quick decisions to make to get that done. And now today, you're seeing that it's rolling out nationally as a viable business model. So back to the three keys, partner with a qualified gigabit internet service provider, aggressively facilitate your city's responsibilities under the development agreement that you have, and then where we are today is trying to drive utilization of broadband across the board. So I've talked a bit about Google Fiber. We have offered the same benefits to other ISPs in our region, Time Warner, AT&T, a few other smaller companies. We're really trying to be as open as we can with that. These aren't services that are specific just to Google. They're available to any ISP So leadership-wise, states enabling your local jurisdictions to make these economic development projects happen really is the key. And we're seeing nationally that cities are really making things happen in the economy. And I'm looking forward to further discussion this morning. What's that? This is probably the first time I finished on time, so thank you.
Thank you, Rick. I'd now like to introduce Ann Byers from the Nebraska Information Technology Commission.
So, thank you. Am I close enough now? Yes. It's great to be here. I'm Ann Byers with the Nebraska Information Technology Commission. I work with our state advisory groups on e-health and broadband issues. I am a partner in the Nebraska Broadband Initiative. Our other partners in that initiative include the Nebraska Public Service Commission, the University of Nebraska, the Nebraska Department of Economic Development, and AIM, which is a nonprofit which focuses on IT workforce development. Many of our activities in Nebraska are similar to what you've done in Kansas, so I'm not really going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about some of our findings related to the economic development impact of broadband, because really that's why we're here, because we believe that broadband is important to the economies of our states and our communities. And I'll also talk about some of our key strategies and our key lessons learned. So now for the economic development findings. The University of Nebraska partnered with SMG to do a study or to survey Nebraska businesses, and we found that over 60% of businesses in Nebraska are selling goods and services online. I was a little blown away by that finding. And then moreover, these businesses typically reported that 25 to 45% of their revenue came from the internet. Again, I think it's a pretty impressive statistic. We also found some documentation that broadband is creating jobs. 364 businesses reported a net increase of 654 jobs due to the internet. Again, pretty impressive. If a business came in and said, we're going to bring 650 jobs, that would be making big headlines in Nebraska. Another thing we found is that broadband applications are becoming increasingly important for agricultural producers. The majority of agricultural producers were using at least one broadband application, and many producers said that they intended to begin using additional applications in the next couple of years. So it's really a growth area in Nebraska, and I suspect in many other areas of the country, probably Kansas as well. And of course, some of these very rural areas, we have many counties in Nebraska where there are more cows than people. It can be very challenging to get broadband out to those areas. And so this may be a bit of a barrier to a few agricultural producers. Nebraska also has a growing tech economy. We're definitely part of the Silicon Prairie. And the biggest barrier that we're hearing from businesses in the tech sector is the need for more skilled IT workers. And we've made a lot of progress in Nebraska. We have some great programs that are colleges and universities and community colleges. We have public schools. We're seeing more and more efforts to engage youth and especially girls and get them interested in coding, but there's still a lot more that we need to do in this area. So, and next I'm going to hit on some of our key strategies. Our first strategy in Nebraska has really been to stimulate demand for broadband by encouraging use through things like workshops and tech fairs and classes. And the University of Nebraska has been a great partner. They've done a lot of these programming in these areas. Our community colleges have also been great partners in AIM. And local libraries have also been just really a key. So we've got a lot of communities that are 30 miles or more from a community college campus. And the library is really an important site for public access and training. We've also done a lot of work to encourage communities to develop technology plans. Nebraska's really been a pioneer in this area. In the 1990s, in the dial-up era, my predecessor worked with 10 communities in Nebraska to get them to develop technology plans. And we worked with another 20 communities about 10 years ago. So it's something that we've been doing periodically whenever there seems to be a demand for it. And it's very powerful to bring together community members to talk about broadband. A lot of times these plans focus more on the use of broadband in the community rather than the infrastructure. And one of the things we're doing to kind of wrap up our broadband grant is to develop a community workbook. It's being produced as kind of an e-magazine format, so that will be available for free to anybody who wants to use it at our Broadband Initiative website, which is broadband.nebraska.gov. So, and then the last key strategy that I want to talk about is really encouraging private investment in the state's telecommunication infrastructure. And we've been doing this in two ways. First, we do not own our own state network. We lease all of our facilities and act as an anchor tenant. And the state of Nebraska and the University of Nebraska came together and aggregated their core network services. And just getting the state and the university to work together on something like this is quite an accomplishment. But it really did help us reduce costs and encourage the private sector to invest in the infrastructure. And all those investments are then that improve the infrastructure that can be used to benefit other entities in the community, businesses and other entities. And then there's one other way we also encourage investment in infrastructure in Nebraska, and that's through our state Universal Service Fund. Nebraska is one of 4 states that supports broadband through their state Universal Service Fund. And so that's really helping to close the gap and to bring broadband to areas that were previously underserved. And then lastly, I want to just hit on some of the key lessons that we've learned over the years. First is that partnerships are important, whether you're talking at the state level or the local level. And also getting local people, local entities to work with the state too. The second thing is there's a tremendous need for technology training. When I first moved back to Nebraska, I coordinated a community internet training program. This is about 20 years ago. And I thought, really in 3 to 5 years, there won't be a need for this program. And I was so wrong. There's always a need for technology training. And then the last is that bringing people together in a community to develop a technology plan can be very, very powerful.
They are all hitting their mark on their time. I'm in awe of them. I think I frightened them.
Yes.
Our next speaker is Gar Clark from the Department of Information Technology, State of New Mexico. Gar.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. It's glad to be here. This is fabulous. I'm Gar Clark. I'm the Geospatial and Broadband Program Manager for the State of New Mexico in the Department of Information Technology. I've been hearing a lot about the group hug concept of broadband, and also what good is it? So is collaboration and relevance, as we saw yesterday. And I think those are two very important things that have come out of the New Mexico program. We are embedded in, the major project that I'm involved in is the State Broadband Initiative, similar to what Stan is doing. I'm his equivalent for this state. I'm also, being the Geospatial Program Manager, embedded into the National States Geographic Information Council, which also is involved in a lot of E911, NG911, geopreparedness, as well as address points for national address data set, And I also chair a committee called the Geospatial Advisory Committee, which is advises the state on geospatial technology. And the reason why I'm going into this is this is a collaborative market that in order for broadband to live and survive and to be understood is very important to hit as many places as possible with educating and the importance of broadband. We're also part of the New Mexico Telehealth Alliance, which has monthly meetings. When we look at the collaborative building that we've done in the last 4 or 5 years, which we won't let go, because this chunk change is getting in a room with people and hugging or just talking about issues. It's really a part of, I have an executive committee which is chaired by the Cabinet Secretary of the Department of Information Technology, which includes representatives from health, education, tribal, nonprofits, as well as regulatory committees. So that group meets, rain or shine, every month, and we talk about where we're at and what we're doing. Now we bring in other issues other than just a state broadband initiative. Other issues that come on in include we're embedded in the FirstNet, the SLIGP, the state and local implementation grant program, which is like a stupid acronym. I think of a slug growing up in Hawaii. I think of a slug going along the pavement, leaving the silver streak. SLIGP. I mean, it just has that sound to it. But also to be top grants, we took all 105 of our telecom towers with the Department of Information Technology, went to analog to digital. $30 to $50 million, depending on how you cut it. So all that is done. So we have this network within the state, so this program is embedded into that as well. As I said to you with the library program, so we were participating in the PCC, the Public Computing Centers. We looked at first Fast Forward New Mexico, which we started up, and that was very, very successful, realizing the importance of the libraries to be a part of the fabric of broadband. Amazing response when we did minimal digital literacy. When we're talking about digital literacy, we're talking about this is a mouse and this is how you use it. Now we have online, and there's a website, and there's some cards back there, but we have online digital literacy materials. I've been told that, well, a bunch of other states are using them nationally. They're quite good, and we produce them as part of this program. It's how do I put my business on the internet? Very simple. They're simulcast stuff, PDFs, they're PowerPoints, things of that sort. Download them, they're free and you can utilize them. Restamp them, I don't care, because it's all your public dollars that bought this. So that's available. Now another thing too that's available that just came in this morning is a website. Now, it's in draft form. I haven't reviewed it yet, but this is another thing of sustainability, of expanding this program beyond its support status. The site is called nmconnect.org, newmexicoconnect.org. We just completed this. What I wanted to do was take the whole digital literacy, or let's call it, it's digital literacy. They think, okay, I'm going to learn English, but it's really broadband education and training. I wanted to build a portal where all of this could be a one-stop shop for the state of New Mexico. So we could link to health, we could link to library, we could, because each of our libraries, by the way, getting back to libraries and to health, is that we have set relevancy in content for certain communities to participate in digital literacy. And that's what Laura agreed yesterday with NTIA. And what 3 of our surveys have supported, it ain't the infrastructure, it's out there pretty much. There are ways of popping it out into the rural communities with TV white space or mesh technology and other forms. However, the big deal, or digital microwave towers, which have capacity to go for 300 megs out to 80 miles. So when you look at that network, we can feed a lot. The thing is relevancy. Is why is this important to me? In all of our surveys, we've done 3 of them, I said, with senior citizens, we've done them with tribal, with gap analyses too associated with this, and health and education, is I don't need this stuff. Well, once we do the digital literacy, the libraries are being impacted. I mean, they're lining up for the computers. So that's why we thought this portal was really important, NewMexicoConnect.org. Now, I wanted it built outside of government. So it's a .org, and it's going to be run by companies and volunteers and people that are not the state. The state will participate. So that's another thing, is getting relevancy into the home and into the businesses. We're just completing another survey of businesses, 20,000 or so businesses, and what we're coming out of that is that those who do not have a web presence, they die early. And so those that do have a web presence, and what you guys are talking about, they grow, and the growth is 5 to 7%. So, and these are businesses under 100, by the way, small businesses, what we're looking at. So all of this data, what it's telling us is that the legislators better get busy, because in New Mexico we're way behind. And as a result, in our state of the state, with our governor, Susana Martinez, was lovely to hear, kind of parodying almost Obama, is the fact that broadband is very important for the state of New Mexico. So we got it. We got in the front door. And part of that too, in looking at this collaborative world, we have a broadband working group that is statewide. We even looked at gender and race in building this thing, as well as levels of governance and private industry. And they're about 30 to 35, and they are the ones that review all the product that we produce. Our contract team, I had orders when I went in this thing. Well, actually, I wanted to keep the money in the state. The state wanted us to hire just a glorified contractor, and then you know, then I just signed things. I said, no, we've got $5 million. Let's keep it in the state. A little bit more work, but we have 12 contractors working on that state broadband initiative, and only one of them is out of state, and yeah, that's because we don't have the expertise nor the connection to, by the way, is Heather here? Heather? Okay, I've got to meet Heather from CTC. I heard she was here. And it's amazing, you live with these people for 4 years and you never see it, you don't know what they look like. So that's another important thing, is that we did not grow government. We use contractors for this entire job, and we have a team that is passionate, interested, community-wise, and they are the ones that are making this work, you know. So sustainability, what we're focusing on is a multi-pin server. That's kind of sounds painful, you know, a group hugging kind of environment, where we're bringing in, as I said, health and education. Last year, we put together a mini recommendation report from health and education, as well as economic development, which spawned into our legislature. And we've been in front of the legislature quite a bit with these interim committees for rural economic development, for a legislative education studies committee, with even water and natural resources, to just talk about the program and informing. So they're getting it. Now we've got 8 bills out there now for this legislation supporting broadband incentives. The thing is, they don't stand a chance in hell. And one reason is because the price of gas is going down for New Mexico. And but then again, we're turning a lot of heads because of this project, and they want to keep it. They want to keep it moving. And so we don't have any guarantees just yet. And the legislature will show it, but as a result of last legislation, we got $50 million to support education, another $50 million for 5 years, $10 million a year to improve the infrastructure, facilities. We redefine the facility of the school to be the district, by the way, which slipped by. So anyhow, that's a lot of different things are happening. I guess that's what I'm saying, is the importance of the 2 factors that we've seen is to create relevancy, but also to the collaborative. We have touched every single economic development organization, every single New Mexico council of government, because these are like spider webs spawning into municipal and towns and and they've been very, very helpful. And I said, God, we haven't really done anything solid. And what I've been getting back from them said, no, you've raised awareness, and now we're going to hit up our legislatures, and that's a groundswell coming on up. So that's what we've been doing, and we've been having fun doing it too. It's been a lot of work, and hope to continue it. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Gar. Our next speaker is Lynn Chadwick from the National Telecommunications and Information Administration.
Thank you. Well, I just want to tell you how happy I am to be here. Thank you, Stan. Thank you, Shelby, for arranging this. It's been great to get to talk and hear what's happening at the ground level. The SBI program, State Broadband Initiative, you've heard everybody talk about. I am one of the 2 program officers in that program, so I work with roughly half the states. And my colleague Brian Davis worked with the other half of the states. So it's been great to get to hear a little more about your programs here. Getting this thing launched was overcoming a lot of challenges. We were creating, one of the first primary goals of it was to create the national broadband map, which meant that we had to get every state and the 6 territories, including DC, to join the program. And then at the beginning of that, every state had to develop a data set. They had to get their providers to voluntarily give them the data. We did not have a mandate to collect this like the Federal Communications Commission has. So they had to ask them. There were a lot of agreements and conversations, and it was a challenge to get it launched. And then once we got the data, we had to sort of put it through a process so that we could look at everything in more or less the same way. So there was a huge data validation process. As a result of all of this, we think that we've created the best data set that we have to know where broadband is in this country. And it was a big heavy lift, and I can't thank you enough for all the work you did. Every state submitted data twice a year, so it was continuously updated. And we are right now reviewing the final data set, and the last map will be published probably at the end of February, around that time period. Then the map is moving over to the Federal Communications Commission, which will collect it in a different way. However, it's exciting to know that many of the states were so pleased with the quality of the data that they are continuing to do this mapping process on their own. Because this really created, forgive the term, data-driven decision-making. This is what I think made it really possible for all those local and regional planning teams that were out in the field. And we know that there were, let's see, I had a statistic, that we had at least teams in 40 of the states that participated. And that was the other thing that I am just in awe of and proud of my fellow Americans about, is the community engagement that came out of this project. People really see it as important to them. It's regardless of what your business is, what your job is, if you have kids, it's something that really brought people together and made them go to meetings, face driving distances. It's an incredible outpouring of effort, so I think that we know how important it is. When we started this, there were a handful of states that were doing some data collection and were doing some development work like this. I'm talking a handful, fewer than 10. There were rural states like Maine, Kentucky, and North Carolina that were doing this, and of course Nebraska. But then also big states like California and New York were doing it. But most states were not, so this was a cold start to get going on this in 5 years and to get that first map launched. Did I mention it's called the National Broadband Map? You want to visit it, trust me. So so a lot of states had to figure out how to do it, and every state, I think the beauty of the State Broadband Initiative was that each state came to it in their own way. We had the rules about the data and getting the map up, but beyond that, more than half the money went to initiatives that happened in the states. And they happened in different places, like yours came out of GIS. Some people, it came out of their Public Utilities Commission. Some people put it in their Department of Economic Development. It was where the state really found it to be the best. In some cases, they could also have a nonprofit do the work for them. And even in doing that, though, the state started developing its own momentum. And that was sort of something unwritten that we were hoping would happen out of this program. The states would find it important enough. They would build a state office and to field the calls from citizens, to coordinate throughout all those bodies that you were talking about, Gar. They needed to pull this together to push broadband across the country. And that's really happened. At this point, about 60% of our programs have a continuation plan, which is phenomenal in this environment. I'm very excited about that. There was a big election, you might recall, a few months ago, and so some places are still working through the details, and it's sort of dicey in some areas exactly how they're going to continue it. But that is a major step forward, I think, for the country. One of the big things that's been interesting to me to watch is the different programs that have rolled out depending on where they're housed. Like if they're housed in the Public Utilities Commission, it's very much under those kind of rate management issues that go on. Or if it's in a GIS, then you've got a tremendous mapping team, people that have come up with speed tests. A lot of states are running speed tests so you can tell if you're really getting the speed that you are paying for, or it's advertised. The economic development offices have really gone, it's been a great place to house many of the projects because it's really a test of, is this going to change? Is this going to bring jobs? Because if you recall where the country was when this started, back in 2009 and 2010, things were not so rosy. We're not looking at extra money. And it was a hard thing for some states to really participate because, of course, we required a 20% match. The match could be in kind. And a lot of states took the time, and I know that they've sort of enjoyed this, I'm sure, but logging in all the minutes, all the number of participants that came to those local regional planning meetings, and they were able to use that time as a match against the federal dollars. And that was, I think that was a very successful strategy because it is worth something. It's worth a lot to get folks engaged because that's when things happen. So now what's going on is how are states carrying this program forward? Like the SBI program itself, there's many different ways it's happening. We were all really happy a couple months ago when Minnesota announced a $1 million program to help build out rural broadband. That's probably one of our big success stories there, but Minnesota they had spent a lot of time working on educating the legislature and getting the communities to come forward and talk about it. In Vermont, they have created a division of connectivity. It's a great name. And they're still trying to figure out exactly where it goes. Does it go in their Public Utilities Commission? Does it go in their Economic Development? But they realize they will find a home for it, but it's important for Vermont to focus on this. And without that division, and it may only be 2 people, it won't happen. But it does give that central coordinating effort for the state. In Arkansas, one of the interesting projects they did, and the state was not really wild about this project in the beginning, so they tried to figure out a way to engage every community they could. And one of their tasks was they built a website for every county government. And it was hard to get the first one to say, we want a website. Why do we want a website? This is a dumb thing, and it's just something we'll have to keep up with. Well, they built a website, and they brought in tax revenue they had never been able to collect before. In the first 6 months of like $200,000, people, all of a sudden they started saying, this is not only a good thing for us, there's money here for governments. And so they were able to take that success and carry it out. So now, every rural county practically in Arkansas has a website. And all of a sudden they go out in teams, so the local businesses start showing up. We want to have, if we're in a tourist industry, we want to have our inn or our restaurant on that county website. So it started a ball rolling in a place where it was sort of, they were not that interested to begin with. And that's been sort of interesting to watch, is the wave of enthusiasm that's come across the country with this. Because I remember when I was first working on this program, people kept saying to me, what the heck is broadband? And now it's come true. Okay, let me tell you about some other states here. Arizona did an interesting thing. They worked very hard to get legislation into their highway division so that they had, every time a road is built now in Arizona, they put in the conduit so that fiber can be laid quickly and cheaply if it's not already there. If they're not being able to afford to lay it right then, it'll be a lot faster to lay it when they can. There's a lot of these dig once laws that are going on around now. When something happens, you want to dig once and make sure you get in the dark fiber or make that conduit in there. I used to live in San Francisco, and when they replaced the cable cables. And if anybody travels to San Francisco, you want those cables working. It took a long time because the city built in everything in those. That's when they started laying fiber in that, during that process, and that was 15 or 20 years ago. So that's a really interesting thing, and they got it in the law, and it's, I think they said it just really costs pennies to do it when you're building a road. How am I doing on time? 1 more minute? Okay, the other thing that I wanted to, and Rhode Island has an Office of Digital Excellence, that's what they call it. I think that sounds great. I asked if the bosses called His Excellency, but that's not there yet. The other thing that Pete said, groups are really up to is the FirstNet project coming on right now is a real opportunity for the SBI to show the folks what we know and how to continue that momentum. And that's where the big money is right now in the federal government in this area, to be honest with you, is that FirstNet effort. So they need you, and it's a good place to go to work with them. So the other thing, I just want to say one more thing. As you said, you developed a lot of resources, Guard. Everybody has. The next thing, the Broadband USA that we were talking about earlier, what we're doing in the SBI is collecting information from all the states that we have that we can publish, and it'll make it available for folks to come and look at it. Because you might find something there that fits your needs, and you'll be able to look through that library of what we have collected in terms of all the digital literacy things, the local planning team issues that have come up and how people have dealt with them. So we really want to have this as an ongoing resource for you. And thank you very much.
And we'll now open the floor for questions.
It was said several times yesterday, and it's come up again today about that every time we survey why people aren't utilizing broadband, it's because it's not relevant to them. Have any of you did anything where you felt like you shifted that, and specifically, if you were able to positively impact that, what did you do that did that?
Go ahead, Zach.
You go first. Go ahead.
What we've done is that we've actually accelerated our digital literacy learning. We did a number of things where we developed content, and we focused on train-the-trainer program within the state of New Mexico. And part of this, we developed a website called DLR, Digital Literacy Resource, where you could put in your address and it would find the closest place where you could have access to a computer. It's kind of a catch-22 because you need a computer to find the computer. So it's, in that regard, it's a little stupid, but the thing is, people are using it. So, I mean, this is risky behavior is what I thought, but it's been something where you can find a computer, whether it's a Boys and Girls Club, whether it's the Rotary Club. Some of them have access for the public to come on in and use it. Also, universities, community colleges, they're all part of the fabric, and most importantly, of course, libraries. So, in that database, which is spawned from this mapping thing, which we call CASA in the state of New Mexico, the Community Anchor Site Assessment. In that, we have all of government institutions. We're now building into it not only state but local institutions because they're seeing the importance of having all this. Now, from the telecom side, it's about co-location opportunities for to flatten costs. When you do a flat cost allocation model, if you have 5 or 6 facilities on the same bandwidth. So getting back to the digital literacy part, is a train-the-trainer focused on small business incubators, on tribal, on communities that have staff available to train. So we're not talking about expanding the training program. And what that did was that when we look at the statistics and what has happened, each of those trainers went out and trained 6 to 10 folks every 2 or 3 months. So exponentially, all of a sudden we touched a lot of communities, both in the professional side, but as well as the public side, through educators. And then we found that, and we did a longitudinal little quickie survey, and found out that these DLRs were being used much more heavily. Now, we did this training throughout the whole state. We divided the state up in 9 sectors. And so, yes, Directly and indirectly, that's what we did, and as a result, that's why we are putting together this portal as well. So, so that's just one of the things, and then also now we're developing content focusing on economic development. By the way, that's where the money is in our state, and that's what we're going for, because we're looking at existing trusts or existing accounts. So we're hitting on economic development legislation in order to expand upon this, because workforce solutions and training of a workforce is really, really important for economic development. And they need to know broadband, they need to know how to apply for a job, they need to know how to put together a resume. So that's what I'm talking about content, is what is important. It's not more about the mouse, but it's about the content, which is how do I prepare a resume and how do I apply for a job? Because I'm used to, doing it, printing it out and sending it in. How do I digitally prepare and save it and submit it so it doesn't disappear? So things of that sort.
I just have it. In some states, they've actually gone out in the field. They go to county fairs, they go to the state fair, they have a booth, they do demos. They go to senior centers, they go to libraries, they go to clubs. It's like they decided they have to go out to do it, like the state, Arkansas. They went to the county government and sat down and met with them and showed them what it was. They had to go out and spend time doing that. And that outreach, of course, takes time and effort. Some of our states had what they called a local champion. That was his or her job, was to go out and find places to go and to meet with people one-on-one, to go to the Chambers of Commerce meeting, to go to the Rotary Club, to go out and do it, because some people who haven't seen it or haven't used it, it's too intimidating, and you've got to meet them where they are. And I think that those were some successful strategies. Figure out where they are. Go to senior centers or just places where people will be, and bring the demo along, and then they recruit them for these training programs. And so there's like a lot of recruiting that goes on that way. But it's been a major outreach effort in some places.
And our survey of senior centers, I had to go to a lot of senior centers, and I walked into one of them and it said, if you're 60 and above, you're a senior. Kind of ticked me off.
One very successful project we had in Nebraska, the University of Nebraska partnered with some Latino business leaders in Omaha to have a workshop on using the internet. And they had great attendance and were very happy with the training. But I think the secret to their success was that the organizer personally called up business owners, went to their businesses, twisted their arms, said, you need to be there. So often we just put up a flyer, send out flyers, or put an announcement in the newspaper or the radio, and it was the personal contact that made the difference there. Also, I want to say that I think in the future, the killer app, what gets people who are not online right now, not interested, is going to be managing their own health care. There have been some great pilot projects where hospitals are now penalized if they have too many patients readmitted for certain conditions within 30 days. So they give patients tablets with like a year subscription, with instructions for managing their care after they're out of the hospital. They can communicate via Skype or whatever with their doctor's office. They can put in some of their vital statistics like their weight and blood pressure, so the doctor or nurse can check that. And it's reducing hospital readmissions. It's giving them a device, the connectivity, a little training, and a reason to use it.
So in Kansas City, first of all, I got to give a shout out to Chepto at the Kansas City Library. Hello. She will tell you they've been at the forefront of the digital divide for 15 years in Kansas City. So really saying that 17%, I think was the number in Kansas City, of our residents don't see the relevance of the internet or have a need for the internet is I think really kind of the same language that we hear from some of the incumbent ISPs, that our customers don't want gigabit services. When you see it, when you see what you can do with internet access, then our citizens are embracing it. Connecting for Good, if you go to connectingkc.com is their site, is a local not-for-profit that started about 3 years ago in Kansas City. They provide digital literacy training and digital life skills training to low-income residents in Kansas City, Missouri, and Kansas City, Kansas. Been very successful. They've trained over 2,500 residents. They sell refurbished computers for $50 to these residents, and they also have joined us in an effort to identify where all of the Wi-Fi hotspots are in the city. We also have a digital inclusion fund in Kansas City now that is helping organizations like Connecting for Good, the library, and others to provide this training and connectivity in the city.
Other questions? Yes.
Mike Ross, RT5. Thanks for sharing your expertise with us. Kansas is a small town state, 676 towns. 3/4 of them have a population of 1,500 or less. So in particular with the other states, what are some state-led programs that you found particularly successful in advancing broadband to the rest of us who choose to live in rural areas?
Yeah, New Mexico is very rural too, and what we have looked at is worked with our providers on a cluster approach to lighting up small cities. We're not there yet. Essentially, we have a 3-tiered approach to those folks out there, and where the fiber return on investment, or even just doing it, it's just not equitable. I mean, there's no way. So we're investigating, and as far as one of the experiment projects too, is utilizing TV white space to get out there, jump it from a tower. And so we're looking for a legislator to come up with $7 million so we can match some FCC dollars for $32 million. And what we're understanding, this could actually be a national experiment in the concept of testing in New Mexico. We'd love to cover the whole rural area of the state, and as you know, that's a mandate too. Other such things as mesh technology, but also digital microwave as well, using our towers. We have a problem in New Mexico in the sense that public-private partnership, we really need to have something like that, because we cannot mix public dollars with private dollars for projects. It's called the anti-donation clause. So it really hampers the fact that if we want to work with a provider, we really got to keep the cash separate in doing some of these projects. And it has hampered services to our communities, which is a negative, and it's kind of backfired on the provider industry who lobbied to get this put in many years ago. So that's something that there are ways to wiggle around it with nonprofits as well as others, but really when you look at the technology fixes and for our schools and libraries, part of that is then getting it to a public building and then Wi-Fiing it out and pretending we don't know that they're using it. So that's another part. So that's how we're approaching rural New Mexico. But the 3-tiered approach is very politically important, that if the provider cannot provide equitable and fair-priced service, because there's some gouging going on out there, big time, especially the E-rate, then we move to the 2nd tier. What can we do to partner, and have a provider and a public partnership? And if that ain't happening, then the state will do what it can do in order to get services out there. And that's worked really well. Just to note too, on our committee, the executive committee, we have, I didn't mention this industry, we have the director of the Exchange Carrier Group for the state of New Mexico. And with all the non-disclosure agreements we have, which are around 50 of them, the relationship that we have with the providers is more trusting, and is we have, again, a collaborative. When I first started this, oh my God, it was the negative behavior from those folks was just incredible. So, but we're friends now, and there's a trust issue that we want to. It's really important that we have that partnership to make things work out there in rural parts of our state.
In Nebraska, we have a lot of small rural telcos, And quite a few of those rural telcos have fiber to the premise. It's pretty impressive. You know, fiber is not just in the metropolitan areas in Nebraska. That said, not all rural areas or all areas of our metropolitan areas have fiber to the premise. But we also, through our Nebraska Universal Service Fund, have a broadband grant program where areas that are underserved can apply for funding to improve their service. So that's a very effective strategy. We also work with communities to try and help them, better understand what their issues are, put them in touch with providers to talk about these issues and to maybe do a little technology planning. So those are really our big strategies in Nebraska.
Oh, I encourage you to talk with Michael Klein, who's here and is representing Shittick, Kansas, 8,000 residents, 9,200 residents. So they have a municipally owned gigabit network serving businesses and residents. So this really is a way, I think, with the economic development discussion we've had to help preserve those small town economies.
I was just going to say, one of our states in Illinois, when they did their regional planning teams, they said they had not had a meeting unless they had providers attend the meeting. So part of that whole regional, small town, wherever you're planning is, you've got to get the providers to come there, because that you can have this conversation go around and around unless you have somebody who's in a position to provide service. It's going to be hard to get there. And sometimes in these meetings, they've been able to provide, we guarantee that we'll have this many houses signed up, and then all of a sudden interest starts peaking. So that's part of the story, I would say, too.
We have time for a couple of more questions. Other questions?
I have more of a comment. We talked a lot about the economic benefits of broadband, the respect for businesses and how that it can grow the business. We have such a, and then you commented in Nebraska about finding talented people, technical people. With broadband, we can have these talented people working anywhere. And we lose a lot of, great universities here in Kansas, and people get education. In order to get a good job, they have to move to the coast. And we lose people and talent that way. By having broadband at home, you can work for any company anywhere in the world. And I think that's something that we haven't talked about in this conference. It's been more about how you can have your company interacting anywhere in the world. But I think we really need to be looking at keeping our talent in Kansas. Kansas is a great place to live. It's very economical to live here, and that we need to be promoting this to say, get your education in Kansas and stay in Kansas and work abroad, basically.
Yeah, I just want to make one comment. In Nebraska, we have an internship program where the state pays half of the cost of the internship for participating businesses. And about half of the internships are in rural communities. And that's a really good way to kind of get students connected to these rural communities so that they're more likely to stay on after they graduate. And that's been very successful. We're very excited about that program. Or if they, also if they stay in metropolitan Nebraska, we're all for that too.
I think you're right on with your comment. With the internet today, especially with gigabit speeds, where geography doesn't matter, then we need to exploit the geography that we have. And especially back to Connecting for Good with Rick Dean with Connecting for Good's in the back of the room too, if you guys want to talk to him afterward. But it is a really strong tool that we're seeing for economic mobility in some of our lower income neighborhoods. That with these work from home, distance working opportunities, small, again, home-based business opportunities, it's a talent attractor as well. This photograph was in Fast Company magazine. These are the Startup Village residents that kind of started that movement. in Kansas City, what you can learn from us, I believe, and try to implement in your towns is creating an ecosystem that supports an entrepreneurial community. Engage your government with this talent that wants to come to your community, but you need high-speed broadband to do that. One other reference to do that is Brad Felt's book, Startup Communities. Gives you his whole, what he calls the builder thesis on how to really create a community spirit. What we say in Kansas City is that people come for Google Fiber, but they stay for the community. We've seen that time after time through residents that come and stay at Startup Village.
I was just going to make a side comment. I know this is not the issue here, but I live in the Washington, D.C. area, and commuting is a real nightmare. So it's really a treat for me to telework on days that save 2.5 hours of commuting, even though I'm there. So it really affects things beyond just teleworking, because you know, in a rural area, it's becoming such a standard in the workplace that companies that can't offer that will be handicapped, both the companies as well as the individuals. So it's incumbent on us to get good broadband out to everybody.
New Mexico retention is a big problem because we don't pay people enough what they're worth in our state. We're a poor state. The mantra is thank God for Mississippi, which is a horrible saying, but we're way down there. And I mean, it's really, it took a 40% hit pay to come to Santa Fe to work from the Northwest. Regardless, retention is a big issue. So what we're looking at is bringing in jobs from outside that pay better to support an economy that in New Mexico that doesn't do as well. Part of that is, so that's that retention aspect. So if we can do that, then we're adding to the economy by bringing money in. So an important point. As far as Kansas is concerned, what I would highly suggest that anybody visit here, give them Ruby shoes and they'll come back.
I think our time is almost up. I encourage you to connect with our speakers if you have additional questions, and I'm sure they are also available by email and virtually. I think that this is a conference is a wonderful thing to have, but the whole point of this conference and the point of this particular session was to get some ideas for how we move forward at the local and state levels. So if you have ideas and strategies for how, as Kansans, we can begin to work together, all the stakeholders, let's talk about that. Let's begin that conversation. And we have the wiki. That is a good place to start that conversation. So with that, I want to thank our speakers again, and thank you for attending.